Hi everyone, this is Kelsey Jones, Executive Editor of SEJ, and I want to welcome you all to another great SEJ Think Tank webinar. Today we have Brent Satoris. He will be talking about big brands and Reddit, which is super exciting. I've had a chance to go through this presentation with him, and it's got a ton of great information. I'm going to be the moderator today, and right now I just want to have Brent kind of quickly introduce himself, and then we're going to jump into a couple quick notes.
Hi everyone, this is Brent Satoris. As mentioned, I'm a social media guy. I've been working on Reddit actually for about 9 years, almost a decade, and so I've been involved in a lot of the changes with Reddit, and so Reddit happens to be probably one of my favorite social sites, so I'm kind of excited to talk about it, and I'm excited to hear any kind of cool questions that come up. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks Brent. So basically we will be monitoring the conversation on Twitter or other social networks using the hashtag SEJThinkTank. So if you have questions for Brent throughout the webinar, if you ask on Twitter or in the question box in GoToWebinar, then Danielle, our lovely project manager in charge of the webinars, is going to be monitoring those, and so she'll get those to me to ask at the end of the session. We're also going to be asking a couple quick poll questions throughout the presentation, so make sure you pay attention for those and answer them. It's always really cool to hear what the audience's experience is with what we're talking about. Lastly, we are recording this webinar, and so it's going to be made live on YouTube as well as the presentation. It's usually the next day or the day after. As soon as our team gets it edited and live on YouTube, we try to get that done as quickly as possible. So without further ado, I'm going to give it over to Brent to talk about big brands and Reddit.
Awesome, thanks Kelsey. So, as mentioned, I want to talk about brands. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be big brands, but that's the examples that we have in here. I think that the things we're going to talk about, just about anybody could apply, but I want to talk about brands, people, companies, and Reddit. One of the things that I always find really interesting about Reddit and its place in the social media space is that just about everyone's heard of Reddit. If I was, to ask everybody on this webinar, hey, have you heard of Reddit? Just about everybody would say, yeah, I definitely heard of it. But very few people that I talk to actually run campaigns on Reddit or, spend a lot of time marketing in Reddit. And, as I mentioned, I've been doing, Reddit marketing for a long time and working with a lot of different people, and the answers always seem to be about the same when I ask people, well, why aren't you marketing on Reddit, or what is it that's keeping you from marketing on Reddit? It always comes down to a couple main points. Give me 1 second. There we go. The first thing is, in general, brands and people are afraid of Reddit. There's a lot of stories over the year that over the past years of Reddit being a place that has like the underbelly of the web, or there's a lot of trolls there, or in general, a lot of people feel like Reddit hates marketers, right? I hear it all the time. Reddit hates marketers. They hate marketing. They hate SEOs. But the truth is that Reddit doesn't hate marketers. Reddit hates being marketed to, and I can't really fault them for that. I hate being marketed to. A great example, as an SEO, as a social media guy, I constantly get emails to my company SEO page that says, you could benefit from social media marketing, and we'd love to show you how you can increase your engagement, things like that. And it always baffles me. It's like, why are you sending me marketing about the things that I actually do? Like, did you not bother to read anything about me or look at the website at all before marketing? And I think that's what Reddit hates about marketers, is when they don't take the time to do smooth marketing. They don't take the time to really understand the community they're marketing to. There's a great presentation, I linked it here, and I'm not going to go into it too much, but it's called The State of Public Discourse, and it was a whole study done on how people feel about brands and marketing. So I definitely would recommend people go out and read that if you get a chance. The other thing is that brands, they really want to have engagement, but they always want to have it on their own terms, right? Everybody's nervous about this concept of the voice not being under control. Like, what if they ask questions that we don't like? Well, You answer them. What if they say things that are negative? Well, you answer and address those things, right? So it does have a public conversation, and it is outside of the brand's control. And so I think that makes people very nervous. It makes them afraid. The other thing I think that keeps people from really marketing on Reddit is they don't understand it. Like a lot of people, they don't understand Reddit. For instance, Reddit is a blog, it's like a social platform, right? It's actually a code that you can create subreddits on their platform with, which are your own personal communities, right? So a lot of people don't understand Reddit. They're not willing to really market specifically to the Reddit audience. And I think this is also a problem with, our approach to social in general is that people really, they create their own campaign and then they say, oh, social is like a visibility metric, right? If I have my campaign, I can use Twitter to get a lot more views, or I can use Facebook to get a lot more views. You can't really accomplish that with Reddit, and I think that's where a lot of people kind of strike out when they go in there. They're like, oh, well, I have my campaign, it has absolutely nothing to do with Reddit, but it has to do with finance, so I'm going to submit it into the finance page, and I'm going to get a lot of success, and then they fail, and they don't understand why. Before we jump into kind of why, some of this is happening, I think we're going to go to a quick poll question.
Okay, awesome. Let me pull it up here, my other screen. I'm going to launch it now. So the poll for everyone to answer is, are you currently running marketing campaigns on Reddit? And this is going to help Brent kind of gauge which of you guys are already involved in Reddit and who wants to learn more. So the answers are yes, no, because Reddit scares me, no, because I never really thought about it, and I have in the past. So we have a lot of responses coming in, about 73%. I'm just going to hold it for a couple more seconds. All right, I'm going to close it. And as you can see, the results overwhelming. 81% no, I just never really thought about it. So that's really great that we are having the webinar today so we can learn more about how to be better marketers and just community members on Reddit as well.
And I have to say, again, that's not something that's overly surprising to me. I mean, I do think it falls in there, and you can see a lot of people saying, haha, Reddit scares me as well. I don't know how much of that is humorous versus, real, but nonetheless, I mean, it's definitely something that's not surprising. But the truth is, regardless of the reason, if you're not actively thinking about Reddit, if you're ignoring Reddit, you're missing out on honestly what could be one of the best marketing opportunities for your company. And there's a reason why. I mean, the thing about Reddit is that out of all the social sites that we've seen over the years, especially the aggregate social sites where content's submitted and voted on, Reddit has consistently grown. Like since the day it started to today, it has a continuous growth cycle. Sites like Dig completely failed. Sites like Stumble Upon that have failed, Delicious, Yahoo Buzz, all these sites that kind of had their moment and then kind of lost it. Reddit has consistently improved on its growth and its success. And the thing is that it has a very simple site. It doesn't use like really fancy design elements to draw people in. It does no mailers. There's never a point when you're on Reddit where you get an email that says so-and-so commented on your story, or check out this new submission from your friends. There's no outbound marketing from Reddit to get you on the site at all. And so it's really interesting, but it's true that the people that are on Reddit, this massive growing audience, they want to be there because they want to be there. There's nothing drawing them in other than the community, the content, and the site. And when I talk about a massive community and when I talk about growth, we're talking about serious growth here. Reddit publishes data every month, and over the years I've had the screenshots here, screenshots there, and I put some together. You can see that in 2011 you're talking 13 million uniques. Yeah, it's a pretty decent thing with about 1 billion page views. But if you look at 2 years later, in 2013, they're up to 85 million uniques and 4 billion page views. And you fast forward to just this month, they're at 171 million uniques with over 7.5 billion page views. That is a massive community. And when you're talking about where you're going to spend your time getting in front of new users or potential brand advocates, that's a huge audience. And it's not only a huge audience, it's an audience that's 62% US, 80% English speaking, with like 80% college, I'm rounding some of these numbers, 80% college education, over 90% made purchases in the last 6 months, 35-year-old median age with a 70,000 median income and an 80% return rate. This is like a really awesome audience. I can't think of any company that I've worked with in the last 10 years that wouldn't say this is a really ideal company. But yet so many people, as our poll showed, have not even thought about being on Reddit. And it really blows my mind how that can be. And again, I think it comes back to not thinking about it, not understanding it, and being afraid of it, and not really focusing on the marketing of it. But not everyone's missing out. These are just a handful of companies that are not just submitting content or having their content submitted, but these are actively running campaigns. And I stopped after 2 pages because I got sick of looking for logos on Google Images, but there's a lot of companies that are taking advantage of marketing on Reddit, and they're not just, like I said, submitting something, they're having really good responses. If you look at Newsweek, they said we're seeing better responses, statistics, and engagement from the Reddit community when they were comparing it to other social communities, right? Maker's Mark, which was run by the iCrossing, all of their campaigns, and they said, look, the response that we received has been everything we could have asked for and more. So not only are people, actively, marketing on there, a small group of people, a small group of brands, but they're having a lot of success. And so right now what I want to kind of dive into is I have 3 examples that I want to go through that I think have a lot of different takeaways for just about anything that you want to do on Reddit, but really emphasize kind of the proper approach to marketing on Reddit. So the first one I want to talk about I call the focus group. There's a company out there, TRANSAMERICA. You might have heard of them. They're a massive financial institution. They wanted to, run a campaign on Reddit. And what they wanted to do, was in part run a campaign, but they also wanted to kind of use Reddit as a focus group, as like a mini focus group to kind of find out what the audience would be interested in. So they ran a campaign that was designed for Reddit. You can see that in the title they're speaking to Reddit. Transamerica wants to help Reddit make dollars make sense, right? They want to help Reddit to better understand these financial issues, right? So they connect their brand with the Redditors right away. They say, look, these issues are confusing, and we can see that there's a lot of debate on your community right now, here and here. And they're actually linking to Reddit discussions that were really deep discussions about financial issues that people were having. So they're connecting, saying, look, we're not just posting an ad here, but we actually are following the categories. We know what's going on here, right? They mention in their text, we have some Redditors here at Transamerica. So they're connecting, saying, look, we're not only just coming here, but we actually have Redditors here. And we want to create meaningful articles specifically for the Reddit community, right? Very designed for Reddit, very connected to Reddit, and they use the self-post format. Now, if you don't know what self-post is, it's basically when you submit to Reddit, the title would link out to whatever link you're submitting. When you do a self-post, you're not linking out in the title to any. You're keeping the discussion, you're keeping the campaign on Reddit. This is a very popular format. In fact, a lot of subreddits require that you do self-posts, to kind of avoid this concept of people just submitting spam or submitting a lot of links. This is, about keeping the conversation. They also did something that was smart, is they actually found the right community. They didn't go in and look just purely for what the numbers were. They really focused on what's their niche, and they targeted that niche. Throughout the engagement, as they're asking people to tell them what they would like to learn more about, they stay completely involved the whole time. They're responding to everybody's questions. They're being lighthearted. They're inserting humor where they can. Some people are challenging them, saying, "Oh, why are you guys in here, posting this stuff? You're really just trying to market to Reddit." And they don't get defensive. They're like, "Oh no, you've uncovered our master plan," or maybe we just want to help you, right? So they obviously understood Reddit and the way to discuss and the way to handle themselves. In the end, when they created the content, because again, they were asking for ideas, they not only created the content that was asked of them, but they did it in a way that, again, said, we're not just making this content, but we're making it for you. They used the fonts, they used the colors, they used the type of view that is, systematic of what Reddit is, right? It used the Reddit colors and things like that. Not only that, but when they made their graphs, they even used the alien's head, right? They used the little antennas to make their graphs, clearly saying to Reddit, look, this is for you. And I think that's really impressive. I found this whole campaign to be really impressive from beginning to end. So when they finished the content, they don't just create it, they came back and they went to every single person in that thread and they started sending them messages. Hey, we've got this for you. We finished this content. They made a Reddit category on the site so people could find all the content, or they sent them the specific articles that related to them. But they delivered it personally to each and every person in that Reddit. When you look at their reasoning, right, this is some of the quoted reasoning. They said, look, we obviously want to get people to become TRANSAMERICA users, but if we can at least have them walk away better understanding this extremely confusing, financial industries in this space, that would be a win for us. And they also said that, look, we want to use this audience as a bit of a mini focus group so that we can find out what kind of things we can be helping people with going forward. Again, if you go back to those demographics, 35-year-old, these are educated, good income. The averages on Reddit are actually very optimal for a company like this, especially in the finance subreddit. What did they get out of it? They got a lot of brand awareness. There has been a ton of articles that have been written about their campaign. It's been included in presentations. It's been submitted for social awards. It's been talked about a lot by me, and it's being talked about here today. So they're getting a lot of brand awareness. They got content ideas, not only for content that worked on Reddit, which they can, hopefully those Redditors ended up submitting as well, but they also got content ideas for what they know to focus on for the next 12 months, 2 years, for a good audience. They were able to really find that information out. They were able to have direct customer engagement. They were able to get focus group type feedback, and they were able to get a lot of articles and links written about their campaigns and written about their efforts from their campaign. All of which to me sound like really positive ROI for the efforts that they put in. This campaign that I want to talk about is personally my favorite. I think that it was brilliant in every way, in the way that they handled it. So Nissan and Amazon decided to do a campaign together. What they wanted to do was they wanted to take the Versa Note, the very first Versa Note of the new year that they were launching, they wanted to sell it on Amazon. It's a cool idea, right? Amazon, they have a really expensive car, you have to buy it on Amazon for the first one. Nice concept. But the people at the community managers in the social group at Nissan were like, look, we want to get this branding message out there. So they wanted to associate Nissan and Amazon together in a brand play. So they decided to come to Reddit and they decided to post again, a self-post format update as an ad. And what they did is they targeted the Reddit community and they said, tell us if you could buy anything, at all off of Amazon, what would it be? What would you buy, right? And this really plays into the Reddit mentality and understanding the Reddit audience, because Reddit is a, how can you say it, up to the challenge type community. Right? They're really, if you want to give them a challenge, they're going to solve your challenge. So they took this with vigor, man. People started coming back with things like how to avoid getting hit by boats, 4,500 ladybugs, how to grow a boyfriend. There was all of these really interesting different suggestions that were coming back as people were trying to be creative or trying to be, unique. The cool thing is, then Nissan's group ends up starting to buy the items for people. So they're like, hey, PM us your contact details. We're going to actually buy this and send it to you. So they started buying all of these different items for people as a way of, again, connecting Nissan and Amazon together. Really good, really nice campaign. Throughout the entire campaign, they stayed there was 2 individuals from Nissan. They commented, they laughed, they joked, they stayed involved the whole campaign. It was really well done. What ends up happening? A month later, people start getting these things in the mail. Sometimes a month later, who knows, the time period, but they started posting. So you see somebody who got a Nexus 10, they end up going into the Nexus community and submitting a picture of them getting this Nexus and talking about Nissan and Amazon, right? I mean, it's great continual branding of all these people who are Redditors who are now coming in and doing submissions. You see thank yous coming up. Even a month later, Nissan is still coming in here and responding to these comments. They're still getting the alerts from their name being used, and they're still coming back to check. So they didn't do the campaign and then walk away and forget about it. They continue to stay through, which I think is very key to successful campaigns on Reddit. So here's what ends up happening, right? Amazon and Nissan start talking, and they say, look, how cool would it be if we actually had this version note delivered in an Amazon box? Everybody knows the Amazon box. You see them on people's porches all the time. So let's make a really, really big one and ship the box in an Amazon box. Right? Great idea. So they end up doing it, and they end up putting it on a flatbed, and they end up sending a film crew to follow them so they can get this whole story of the delivery of it for marketing and for commercials or whatever else they wanted to use it for. So as they're doing this, lo and behold, a Redditor ends up seeing the truck, takes a photo of it, and submits it to the most popular, one of the most popular subreddits, which is Picks, and says, what's the largest item that you can get shipped from Amazon? Because I think my neighbor just got it. And so he ends up posting on a Reddit, and it goes right to the front page of the entire site. Gets almost 4,000 upvotes and gets a ton of exposure. This is so big, it actually gets brought up in one of the AMAs. I forget who it was, but it was a famous actor who's having an AMA, and he stops and he says, do you see this thing about the Amazon box? I wonder if it's a hoax. Everybody started talking about this Amazon box. What is it? What's it going on? It started a whole wave of discussions across the web. So what do? They end up coming back a couple weeks later, doing another Reddit ad to the same community saying, thank you so much for sharing our picture. It got a ton of buzz, and we want to show you the footage that we filmed before anybody else. Now, if any company was to just come on Reddit and say, hey, I want to show you this commercial, you get the first view, Reddit wouldn't care. But the thing is that once you start a relationship with the community, now you can come back in multiple different ways and have success. So instead of people being like, whatever, we don't care about your commercial, everybody remembers this story. Everybody remembers it occurring. So now they're starting to interact with it. Not only do they start interacting with the story, but they start to propose ideas of what would you do with a box that big. So they start coming up with all these ideas of what are they going to do with that huge Amazon box. And again, Nissan comes in and they start sending people rewards. There's a program on Reddit called Gold. It's like a paid membership. Kind of gives you a little bit of flair on the site, shows that you're kind of a core user, a hardcore user. And so they went in, and you can buy it for other people. So Nissan started going in, and all the ideas that they thought were really good, they started buying those people Gold memberships for 1 month at a time. Again, just a continuous, from beginning to the end of this campaign, the proper engagement, right? So they end up, some comments, they were nominated for a number of awards, and some of the comments and some of the quotes from that is that, within hours of topping the front page, their story ends up being in over 150 articles in more than 30 countries. Within hours, this essentially goes viral across the web. This whole campaign jumps forward, right? And it was actually Jerry Seinfeld's AMA, where he stops from the whole thing and says, hey, in his AMA, I wonder if this is a hoax, right? So you're getting Jerry Seinfeld on, an AMA, which is one of the most popular Ask Me Anything kind of interview segments on Reddit, stopping to comment on this, real time. So very, very successful. When they get tons of brand awareness, there's so many articles and references to this campaign, including my own. Direct customer engagement, those people are never going to forget the items that they got or the engagement that they had with Nissan. It's going to keep them connected to that brand for a long time to come. They had a ton of articles and links, which as marketers, we know the value of, getting some good quality links. Maybe Nissan doesn't care, but hey, all links help, right? And they also got nominated, and they won a Shorty Award for this campaign in itself. Last campaign I want to talk about is a slightly different twist on marketing on Reddit, right? And it's with the AMA. One second. I talk too much and too fast, and it causes me to get drawn out. Anyway. The last one I'm going to talk about is an Ask Me Anything. So if you don't know AMA, you've probably heard the term because it started on Reddit, but it's become pretty well known across the web. People do AMAs in all different platforms. In fact, you know, our SEJ summits, we actually have an AMA session. So everybody's doing AMAs. And what they essentially are is they're like a real-time interview in a sense. But what happens is somebody will put in a request to do an AMA. They'll announce that they're going to be here on this day and this time. And they typically do about 1 to 2 hours where they show up. And everybody writes in questions ahead of time. The community votes the questions up. They decide what questions are going to be, you know, show up at the top so that the person, when they come back to do the AMA, sees these questions first. And then they're getting all the answers, and then they kind of have a real-time engagement during that 1 to 2 hours that it's occurring. This became hugely successful. You've had people like Bill Gates, you've had the president, you've had tons of brands, and I want to showcase one brand who's done this well, in my opinion, and that's Intel. So this is actually 2 different AMAs that occurred, but both of them have similar kind of values, and both of them are from the same brand, so I wanted to kind of merge them together and talk about them both. One of the things that they do really well in this is, and I think is very important to having a successful AMA, is setting the scope of discussion. People are going to ask you anything and everything. That's going to happen. But if you can set the discussion points by setting parameters of where your expertise is, what it is that you're planning on talking about, then you can kind of control that discussion a little bit. So you can see that there's an architect and designer at Intel. He does this first about a year before the CEO of Intel does his AMA. And he says, look, these are the projects I've worked on. These are the type of things that I'm involved in. And I'm happy to answer any questions that are related to that. The CEO says, look, I'm looking to talk to engineering students. This is a site that we build. He links to the site. This is good. This is references. It gives them a sense of like they've gone and they've looked at this site. Now they've come back and their mind is fresh on what you want them to talk about, right? So giving them that data that kind of sets the stage for what you want to talk about, it's very key to success in these cases, and I think it's very valuable to consider when putting these together. Another thing that you can do with AMAs is you can actually edit the text at any time. You know, so you can come back and say update. A lot of people have been asking about this. Here's an article we wrote about it. Here, you know, people were asking for our Facebook page. Here it is. And when it's all over, a lot of people will like to close it with, hey, thanks a lot for, you know, attending my AMA. By the way, follow me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter, right? It's a great way of keeping people connected and getting those links in there after the fact or during it. It also shows that you're staying engaged, you're staying involved in the AMA. Throughout both of their discussions, they stayed completely engaged. If you noticed on the last slide here, some of the updates were taking a break, be right back, I've got to run out to a meeting, you know, I'll try to come back later, right? So they're telling people when they're gone so that it doesn't look like they're ignoring people. And they're staying thoroughly engaged. They're staying very personable. You know, somebody asks them what's their favorite food, they're not ignoring the question, they're coming in and answering it, right? They ask them whatever questions, they're trying to address all the questions equally, right? And between the 2 AMAs, they ended up having 7,800 plus comments. That's 7,800 engagements. That's valuable, that's important. And what did they get out of it? They got a ton of brand awareness, because one thing people don't remember is AMAs are interviews. If you decide to go on an AMA, which a lot of people do, as a way of kind of breaking some news, that's newsworthy. And media outlets and magazines and places will pick up your quotes, they'll pick up your answers, and they will write about it. So, you know, CEO, I used this example. The other individual got a lot of, you know, more in the tech space coverage, but the CEO, obviously a little more mainstream, gets a lot of coverage from a lot of good media outlets, you know, talking about his, you know, AMA, the things that he said. So they're getting a ton of direct customer engagement. That's 7,800, you know, I mean, 7,800, you know, comments. They're getting a lot of articles, a lot of links, and they're having a lot of success with the campaign. Really great way to run a campaign. So 3 things I think are super important to take away from this is that it's my honest opinion, and I think that the data shows that Reddit is valuable. I mean, that size of an audience with the right target demographic, I mean, it's just, if you can get in there and spend some time, it's extremely valuable. And these companies that are doing it have realized that, and they are loving it. You know, TRANSAMERICA actually contacted me recently, and they said they've been doing a lot more stuff, and they want to share it with me. So, I mean, this is not a one-time thing. This is something that these companies are really enjoying their kind of, you know, success on, and I'm sure they're enjoying the fact that 99% of all the other brands are avoiding it. You have to cater to Reddit. It's not a visibility metric. You need to think, I'm going to create a campaign for Reddit, and go and create a campaign for Reddit. Keep it on Reddit. Participate. Understand it. Don't just use it as some visibility metric. It's not going to result in the same kind of success. And by all means, you have to stay engaged. I see a lot of campaigns where people are engaged, then they just kind of trail off. And what ends up happening, as we know from any social profile, any conversation, is once you stop participating and other people still are, assumptions start getting made. People start saying, oh, well, you're obviously ignoring these questions. You must not want to talk about it. Or you don't really care about us because you abandoned us in the middle of the campaign. And it can turn negative. So you have to stay engaged the whole time. Last thing I want to talk about real quick, some important things to remember. It is very, very, very important to make sure that you identify the right people or the right person to run your campaign. They need to be connected to the company in a way that they know what they're talking about. They need to have the authority to be able to answer questions and to be able to say things without concern. And they also have to have a good personality for it. They can't be defensive. They can't be rigid. They have to be free-flowing, kind of open, fun, lighthearted. So it's really important that the person that's running your campaign is the right person for that campaign. You should always review similar campaigns. I don't care what you're doing in marketing. There's so many examples out there of other people doing similar things. You should go look at AMAs from similar type of companies, from similar type of people, and say, what questions did they really get ridiculed for? What kind of things did they say that did well and what did bad? And when you're doing campaigns, there's a lot of data there to go look at. And to identify who's doing what's good and who's doing what's bad, and avoid doing the bad stuff. Be genuine, transparent, and engaged. I don't think I need to explain what that is. I think it tells itself. Embrace tough questions. Don't see a tough question and think, well, there's 50 other questions, I'll just move on. It's the questions that you don't answer that can sometimes be the focus of the entire campaign. So always, always be willing to embrace tough questions. Identify the right subreddit and target audience. That's super important. It's not just about how many people follow a subreddit. It's about activity levels, and they show you the activity levels, and there's sites out there. You can search Reddit stats, and you'll find a bunch of sites out there that show the stats on the different subreddits. You want to be in the most targeted subreddit, not necessarily in the biggest subreddit. It's very, very important to the success of the campaign that you pick the right community. Create your campaign for Redditors and know the right format for your audience. This comes from the research. This comes from the subreddit. Every subreddit has its own rules down the right side. Read them. Make sure that what you're talking about, go in and look at the top posts in a subreddit and say, you know, I'm about to talk about this topic, but are the majority of people pro or negative towards this topic? These are things that are important to know to have a successful Reddit campaign. This slide here will be available. This is a bunch of really good resources. This is where I got everything. This is all the campaigns. If you want to dig deeper, there's a lot that you can dig into here. And you know, that's all I have, and I hope that helps, and I'm really looking forward to the questions. But I'm hoping that, you know, you've all got a chance to kind of get excited and inspired. I really think that you should be getting on Reddit, and I'm hoping that everybody here does. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brent. I know that that's a really big list of resources you had, so we'll make that available on SlideShare again, and then also in the post with the video and SlideShare that's going to be on SEJ later. So before we get started with Q&A, Danielle's been sending me a lot of you guys' great questions that you have. Our next webinar, I just want to push it really quickly, is with Stony DeGuider. Hopefully I didn't butcher his last name too bad. He is one of our writers at SEJ. Is a really great contributor, and he is going to talk about 18 ways to build a mobile site users love. And that webinar will be in 2 weeks from today on July 15th at, again, 1 p.m. Eastern. So Danielle's going to give the link to sign up for that webinar in the chat box right now on GoToWebinar, so sign up for that. He's a really good presenter, knows his stuff, so I'd recommend it for sure.
I agree.
So yeah, so next up, and while we're going through questions, you can still live tweet, ask more questions on the hashtag SEJ ThinkTank, and we always check that hashtag throughout the conversation and then also afterward, and if we get to any questions that Brent didn't answer and we are out of time, he will be able to answer those either via Twitter or on the recap post. So never fear, we will answer your questions. So I'm going to look through these here. So first off, we have one. This is a really good question. I wanted to know how big the Spanish-speaking audience is on Reddit, specifically in Latin America.
Honestly, I don't know. They really don't. The stat that I showed you, the graph, was from a presentation that a Reddit employee did about why you should run ads on their site. They don't really list that kind of data off. So I don't really know. What I would say is it's important to remember that Reddit is like Blogger in a sense that people are going there to build their own communities. And so Reddit also has every single language. They've many years ago they started a project of having the site translated, and they took volunteer work in order to translate it. In fact, Reddit actually has a little tidbit for everybody, a pirate speak language. So you can actually go into your settings and you can turn the site into pirate, and then everything is spoken in pirate to you. So little things like that. So there's definitely an opportunity for that. There's definitely an opportunity for that audience to exist. What I would really do is I would I would go into some of the stats like the redditstat.com and some of the other sites, and you're able to search the subreddits. I would do some searches or even Google searches with the reddit.com, and then type in some phrases in Spanish that you think would relate to your target demographic and see what subreddits. You can also search on Reddit itself, and when you do a search in Reddit, it will show you the top subreddits where that phrase is being used. So you can go in and search some phrases in Spanish and identify where there might be an audience there. So it takes a little bit of research on your part, but it's something that I think it's probably the best way you're going to find the answer to that question.
Okay, and you said the website was redditstat.com.
I think, how you actually spell it, you'd have to search it real quick, but it's redditstat.com. There's a couple of them. Reddit's an open source, they went open source, I don't know, years back, and so they have an API, and so there's sites out there who have built themselves around the stats on Reddit. And so if you search Reddit stats, you'll find 5 or 6 sites that will have different layouts and different information about the different subreddits.
Okay, awesome. Here's a really quick question. Jessica wanted to know, what subreddit did the Nissan and Amazon post go into? I know you had said Pix was for the big box, but what about the one where they were buying things for people from Amazon?
It was an ad, and unfortunately ads don't ever tell you where they're from. So I have it in the resources somewhere. I think it had the actual, it was thank you Reddit, but they don't tell you. With the ads, the thing is that I don't remember what subreddit it was in, and the ads, they only show like their little tracking code, so you can't tell which subreddit was from that. So I really don't know. I'll try to see if I can find out. I have some connections there. I'll shoot off an email and see if I can find that out, and maybe we can add that into the recap post.
Okay, yeah, that'd be awesome. All right, so Greg, he's joining us from the UK. So thanks, Greg, for coming on at your nighttime. He wanted to know, what are the big no-nos with Reddit? Are there any cardinal sins as a marketer to avoid when you're marketing or doing campaigns on Reddit?
So I think that first and foremost, it really depends on the subreddit. It's not so much a Reddit thing. Again, when you look at Reddit, you really have to look at it like, I love using the WordPress.org or Blogger example, because it really is something where the actual employees of Reddit don't, they run or they participate in a small handful of groups. Basically as an oversight because of how popular they are, but the majority of the groups are all privately run. So if I tell you, you gotta be anonymous, I believe that when you make an account on Reddit, the first thing you should do is you should be anonymous. If you're a user, use an avatar, use a kind of a fake pseudonym name, something interesting. And people might debate that, but here's the truth. Every employee at Reddit uses a pseudonym. Nobody uses their real name. Every moderator has a pseudonym. Nobody uses the real name. And I would say the vast majority of Reddit does not use the real names. again, there's a concern in Reddit just because of the audience, the size, that people, they'll research you, right? There's a lot of people who are kind of, in that mindset on Reddit. So you can find people when you make a statement who will go through, find information, come back 5 minutes later and say, I can't believe you made that statement when 2 years ago you said this, right? And so people tend to be, they want to be a little more anonymous on Reddit. And so that would be the biggest suggestion I would make. Now, the brand examples I gave you when they're doing these campaigns, they made a special account for that campaign that was branded, and I think that that's perfectly fine, to make those campaigns. But if you're being involved on a daily basis, I would, choose a pseudonym. The second thing that's the most important thing is people don't read the rules. There are different rules for every single community, and some of them don't make any sense. In one site, you can only have Huffington Post links. In the next subreddit, you're not allowed to put Huffington Post links. There's certain communities, I always joke about this, there's one subreddit where you're only allowed to put the word cats. The title of every submission has to be cats, and that's it. There's so many rules that apply to one subreddit and don't apply to the other, that it's not easy to really give a blanket. But what I would say is read the rules and adhere to them, because otherwise your stint in that subreddit is over. And I think those are the two biggest ones I would give right now. I could go on for an hour, but those are the two biggest ones.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Thomas says, these are some great strategies, especially the focus group way of looking at Reddit. My question is, what ways could a smaller brand leverage Reddit and the community, especially when brand recognition is low?
I would never with Reddit assume that it has to be a big brand. The biggest AMAs are not branded. The biggest AMA, one of the top AMAs ever, and I think it's the biggest AMA ever, was a guy who was a vacuum repair guy. And he shut sites down with the traffic. It was amazing. So I spent a lot of time reviewing this, but we didn't include it because it wasn't a big brand, and that was the focus of this, presentation. But this, the way that these things happen, you don't need to be a big brand. You just need to have a strategy and go in. I know a lot of charities will go in and ask, what should we be doing better? A lot of apps will go into very specific target, demographics in there and say, this is our new app. We'd love to get some feedback. All of you can have a free download, whatever. It doesn't matter what your company size is. It matters that you're choosing the right subreddit. You're speaking to them in a tone and in a discussion point that they are used to, and you're being open and friendly and engaging. I think you can get success across the board, and the examples that I have, which are tons that I've gathered over the years, the majority are just average everyday people.
Yeah, just everyday people with something interesting to say that appeals to the community, for sure. Okay, here's a good one. You mentioned that there aren't any outgoing emails from Reddit, so how do you manage engagement and responding to comments? Is there some sort of notification to ease the process?
So when you get replies, they show up in Reddit. So when you log into your account, you have a couple elements in the top, and it will pop up with a little number that's, hey, you've got a mail, everything's a mail, right, in Reddit. So you'll get a little mail icon that says you have mail. You click on that. The mail includes all the moderator, information that you have. If you're a moderator of an account, you'll get all the questions. It will have all the personal contacts. It will have the replies that people have made. So every reply to your comment becomes a mail. And you can silence it, but it's all there. So it's not something that you get a notification of. It's something that you see when you're on Reddit. And I may be wrong. I can double check that. There might be a setting in there that says mail me when you get a notification. But to be honest, we don't even use email addresses when we sign up for our Reddit accounts. When we signed up for our Reddit accounts, my accounts don't even have an email associated with it. It's not what it would be a common practice to associate an email address with Reddit. You just have an account.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the pseudonym factor, that's just really common in Reddit that isn't common on any other site, just commonplace to have a pseudonym. So let's see. How How do you research subreddits to find demographics and reach? Chris was asking.
Sure. So like I mentioned, the Reddit stat and some of the other ones, they have some really good sites out there that will show you, because they're pinging constantly on Reddit. So they'll show you like, this is the growth rate. So one of the things I always tell people is, if you're really looking at a long-term strategy, which I fully, support, look for subreddits that are growing but haven't reached a critical mass yet. Because once they hit a certain critical mass, everybody gets defensive about why you're trying to participate. Now you're, being attracted by marketers, you're being attracted by spammers, you're starting to attract a lot of attention. It gets a lot harder to get in. So I always tell people, look for subreddits on your topic that show a really high increase in growth. And they'll show you that per week, per day, per 30 days, lifetime, how many members there are, what's the engagement, how many, etc. On each subreddit, you'll actually see activity levels. So they'll say there's 1 million people who are subscribed to the subreddit, but next to it, it'll say like there's 1,050 people online now. That online now is a really good metric when you're comparing different subreddits to say this subreddit has 1 million, subscribers, and this one also has 1 million subscribers. But this one has 10 active people, and this has 1,000 active people. You want to go where the activity is. It's beyond that. Like, there's no analytics. You're not getting like stats and stuff in there. So you have to gauge it based on what you have in front of you.
Okay. Here's another good one. Do you have any tips for brands using Reddit without running a paid campaign?
Yeah, the paid campaign, so for instance, the CEO one, not the CEO one, the Intel one, the one at the very end was not paid. That's an AMA. AMAs are not paid. There's a lot of opportunity in Reddit with content, so you can submit content. It's very frowned upon to submit your own content. It doesn't mean that you can't submit your own content. It means that you really should be few and far between. So it's not about, self-promotion. You will kind of get there. Just to put it out there, there is no gaming Reddit. Like, it's just
Don't even try.
you can probably do it, and I know people who have, but the thing is that the amount of effort that you have to go through and the short life cycle that you have and the potential risk of just being for life banned forever, your domains and stuff, it's just not worth it. So when you're going in, there's content. You can submit your own content. You can do an AMA. You can go into subreddits and you can have discussions through self-posts. Another thing to really do is you can make RSS feeds out of searches on Reddit. So one thing you can do is like use if this then that, set up some search queries so that you get them notified. And when people are talking about things, like let's say you're a fashion company and you focus on socks, right? You can go into a bunch of fashion subreddits like the frugal fashion, all these different fashion things, and people will ask questions like, I got this new, I got this new shirt, but I need to figure out a pair of socks to go with it. These are opportunities for you to come in and say, hey, we happen to specialize in socks, and I think this pair would be great for you. And by the way, if you buy this pair, use this coupon code and get 50% off. Right? There's a lot of opportunities in the discussion. AMAs were actually founded. Like the way that the whole Ask Me Anything started is that people would put self-posts in categories, and as people were kind of doing them, somebody said, hey, ask me anything, and they started this thread in one of the subreddits. What ended up happening is people started telling people when they were answering questions, hey, you should do an AMA about this. And they started off in the small subreddits, and then they created an AMA subreddit, which became the main one it is today. So there's a lot of opportunities in the comments to be asked to do an AMA, which gives you a great excuse to say, I'm not just trying to come here and talk about things. I was requested to come and do an AMA, and that's why I'm doing it. Ends up being the case for a lot of people to kind of have successful AMAs, is to find opportunities in the comments. So, I guess if I could summarize it, pay attention to the subreddits, read the comments, participate. That's the whole concept of my advice, is that you're not going to go in 5 minutes and do a campaign and leave. You're going to go in and spend time, learn, participate, and all of these answers will become very clear when you do that.
Yeah, that's really good advice, especially the RSS feed for searches. I didn't know that. That's awesome. Okay. We have a lot of really good questions, so thank you guys for submitting those. We're going to go for probably about another 5 to 10 minutes. Let's see, I already did that one. If I'm interested on advertising in Reddit, where do you start? From
So
Jesse.
there's a link in the bottom for advertise, and it's a self-serving advertising platform. I believe, and I'd have to double check, I believe the budget is 10,000 or 25,000. One of the two.
The
I'm drawing a
minimum?
blank right now. No, not for self, but you can go in with a budget of 30 bucks and you can do advertisements, and it's a great opportunity, and I think you should really look at it, because there's not a ton of people using the system, so you can kind of get in and you can get in some really good visibility. I've found in certain cases that I can own an entire subreddit every single day for 3 days for like 60 bucks, right? And if it's your target demographic, great. It's a great opportunity for low cost to test ads. So I would absolutely go in, test the ad system, run some ads. If you have a budget of, I want to say 10,000, it might be 20,000, 25,000, but I think it's 10,000, then you can get a rep. And you can contact Reddit and say, look, I want to, and I think it even says it on the advertised page. They change it a lot, but if it still says it, it says, if you have a budget here, click here and contact us, and you can contact them and they'll help you set it up, and they'll help you manage it, and they'll give you kind of consulting and stuff like that. So if you have a decent budget, Reddit will actually help you do the ads. Otherwise, use the self-serve, and if the cost is so low, to not test it out is just silly.
And the self-serve, it's kind of promotional posts, right? So those posts are
Self-serve is on every page. There's a block at the top that's a lightly blue. I think it's a light blue hue or whatever. There's a box at top that is sponsored. It runs Reddit sponsored, so when they want when they just want you to know about some event, it runs from the self ad system. So when you go in and make an ad, you choose from either I want to select this subreddit, I want to select the entire front page, and then they also have category selection. So you can say I want to target tech, and it has a bunch of subreddits that it assigns to the quote-unquote tech category. So you have a couple choices there. You put in your budget, it projects what you're going to get, and you run the ads.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I think we're going to close with just one more question. If we didn't get to your question, we will answer it in the recap poster on Twitter on the hashtag SEJ ThinkTank. So Wiz wants to know, when is a good time for a new user to for the first time for them to promote their brand? Should
Yeah.
I comment for like 3 to 4 months before doing that?
Well, I mean, there's some articles out there I've read about the whole 3 to 5 months, whatever. That's kind of silly. The idea is that you should participate effectively before you submit. So comments and comment karma is more what Reddit is about from a Redditor user standpoint. It's not about your submissions, right? And so I suggest definitely spending about a month participating on a regular basis before you submit anything, whether it be your content or somebody else's content. I really think you should spend some time conversating, getting to know people. I'm a big believer in, and this is my personal advice, whenever you do start submitting, I would go and look at the moderators in the subreddit. I would look at what their submission history is for that subreddit. I would identify the sources and the topics they're submitting, and I would find similar content from the same source, and I would submit that first. It's kind of a tactic in my mind that it aligns you with people, and it draws a positive view of you as a user within that community, within that subreddit, and I think it helps you to have more success with submitting anything. But again, I do want to say that don't get in this mindset of I spend 30 days, I've learned what they submit, I've got on the good side of the moderator, so now I can spam. It's never going to work that way. Not on Reddit, and the thing about Reddit, I remember when we first started noticing silent bans. So Reddit, when it bans you, it doesn't ban you. You don't get an email. They do what they call quiet bans, and Delicious did this for a while too, and a couple other sites did it too. So basically, what happens is you're logging in, you're submitting, you're commenting, you're participating, you're doing everything, and nobody else sees it, and you do, and it keeps you from going and making another account. I found people that have been active on Reddit for 6 months, and then realized that nobody else could see a single thing they were saying. And they just thought they were failing, and it turned out that they were silent banned. And silent ban can be checked by simply going to your profile and then logging out and going back to your profile URL. If you see a 404 page, you are silent banned, and you need to make a new account.
It's kind of awesome that they do that, though. I mean, I would
See,
think that would cut down on the
but
really annoying people, at
but the
least temporarily.
the point of that is that then, if you ever bring it up to them or something, they're like, look, the point of Reddit is to read, learn, and participate, not for you to be able to submit your own content. That's their view on it, right? Now, again, that's the company view. Each different subreddit has a completely different standard on what you can and cannot do. So you cannot look at Reddit and think this is how Reddit works, right? You have to look at the communities as well, because for every rule, there's an exception when you go to another subreddit.
Gotcha. Yeah, and each subreddit has moderators that will enforce the rules. So, okay, well, Brent, thank you so much. It was really interesting as always. Don't forget that our next webinar is July 15th with Stony about mobile site optimization, same time. And I want to thank everyone for joining us and look for the recording tomorrow or the next day on YouTube. Thank you. Bye.